I'm Chris Marler. I'm joined by my good buddy, Adam Spencer. Adam does pretty much everything for us at SDS, but also is really good at making lists, which is where we find ourselves today. How are you, man?
Doing great. Ready to talk some wide receivers here.
Yes, we did quarterbacks last week. We're going to do receivers this week. Like last week, we kind of, like, I feel like you got off easy. There wasn't like anything too egregious. There wasn't like anything that was going to cause a huge stir. Not the case this week. We got a top 10, and then we also have a couple honorable mentions, or as you label them next up, as you can see right there. We'll kind of breeze through 10 through 6. We get Hazelwood. I love that from Arkansas. Like all the skills are there. Kyrus Jackson, if he can stay on the field, completely agree. Tyler Harrell, I see what you did there at 8.
Hey, nobody really knew Jameson Williams before last year, outside of Ohio State. And coming to work with Bryce Young, being a speedy guy, like I really expect him to step into that role and maybe not become a first round pick like Jameson Williams did.
right.
But man, I mean, just having speed with Bryce Young throwing you the ball, I mean, I think that spells a big year coming for Harrell there.
He only had 18 catches last year.
Yeah. That's Louisville for you though. I don't know what they're doing up there.
Yeah, for real. But like the point is, like of the 18 catches, that's extremely, extremely low. The kid averaged 29 yards per catch. And then also, I think like exactly half, like nine of his catches, 9 of the 18, so 50% of his catches on the year went for over 30 yards. So very explosive player. Love that. Okay. Down to 7, Josh Vann. This is the only one I had a little bit of an issue with. The numbers really don't back it up. I think he just has built an entire career off of what he did against Georgia.
Hey, I mean that's a good team to do stuff against though. So I think he's got the potential. I think that South Carolina quarterback situation was less than ideal last year. I think
Yeah.
we can all agree. When you have a graduate assistant throwing you the ball for a majority of your games,
Just
just so
awful.
yeah, so I mean, I like his potential there. I think Spencer Rattler gets a bad rap, as we talked about during the QB rankings one. I think he's gonna, bounce back pretty strong, and I think Josh
Yeah.
Josh Vann and Corey Rucker, who's in the next up, those guys are gonna be the benefit of a lot of those passes that Spencer Rattler can make that those quarterbacks last year couldn't.
There was very few things those kids could do last year for sure. No, and like in the Manning passing camp or passing academy was this past weekend, and Rattler got rave reviews there as well. All right, before we get in the top 5, you have number 6 here, Justin Shorter from Florida. I like that. I feel like I mean, Richardson's got to have somebody to throw the ball to, so I wouldn't disagree with that. Let's get into the top 5. I will let you take it away. Number 5, you have Jonathan Mingo from Ole Miss. Why?
He produced last year in a receiving room that was pretty talented, and Jordan Watkins is another next up guy who they got from Louisville. Jonathan Mingo, though, I think is going to be the star this year if he can stay healthy. That's a question with some of the guys on this list is health, but if
Yeah.
he's out there, he catches a lot of touchdowns. He's a very solid go-to threat. I think Jackson Dart is going to really like throwing to him, throwing to the tight end Michael Trigg.
Yeah.
So
That's a name to watch out for too, Michael Trigg.
definitely.
Okay, number 4. This is probably the only one I disagree with, and I love that you threw in a Bama guy, but Jermaine Burton, the Georgia transfer going to Bama, he's at 4. Why is that?
Somebody's going to be the go-to guy for Bryce Young this year. And I think Jermaine Burton, he's another guy, like I've said a couple times already, if he could stay on the field, he's a
Yeah.
threat. He really seems to be gelling with, the Alabama situation there. So, I would expect him to really, become the number one receiver. I would be
Right.
surprised if he wasn't this fall. And if you're the number one receiver under Bryce Young, then you're a top 5 receiver in the SEC. I mean, I just think
Yeah.
that, it's sort of like if he can fill the John Mechie role and Tyler Harrell can be
Right.
80% of what Jameson Williams was, then, Alabama's offense is good to go there.
Yeah, I mean, the logic is all there. I completely agree with that part. I just looking at his numbers, 24 career starts, he has 100-yard game. Just one. And he only has 2 games where he caught 5 or more passes. And that's not necessarily his fault. He wasn't getting fed the ball a lot at Georgia. I think that's obviously why he went to Bama. So that part all makes sense.
That's part of what when I went and looked at each school's last 1,000-yard receiver. I mean, Georgia hasn't had one in a while. Auburn, it was the last on the list, but Georgia hasn't had one for several years now. So I think that's just more of a function of the Georgia offense that was sort of holding Burton back a little bit.
I hope so. I mean, like 11 of 24 games all time, he had 1 catch or less. He's gonna get the ball. I think you're right. Like he's obviously gonna get fed when he's over in Tuscaloosa. All right, number 3. This was kind of a surprise to me. Ainias Smith.
He's a versatile do-it-all guy. He started out, more of a runner than a pass catcher, but then when you have Isaiah Spiller, when you have Devin A-Chain, he got to find ways to get the ball. So, he's sort of morphed into not exactly a Percy Harvin type role, but like something kind of like that, like a hybrid type, like a Debo. And, I think that's great. I mean, and he's a great playmaker. He's got speed for days. He's just, so, it's going to be interesting to see, because that's probably the biggest quarterback decision that needs to be made in the SEC is out there in College Station, if they're going to live up to the expectations that they have. So, if it's Max Johnson, that probably means more catches for Ainias Smith. If it's Haynes King, maybe that means more big plays for Ainias Smith. I don't know. But, I think whatever the case may be, he'll find a big role for himself.
Yeah, it's almost exactly like the point you made with Burton and Tuscaloosa. Like somebody is going to have to catch those balls. Like Zach Calzada's gone, so they can throw the football again. Thank God for A&M. I think Max Johnson is going to be the winner of that QB battle, but
I do too.
We'll see how it plays. He just fits that like a Jimbo offense way better. I don't know. We'll get into it another time. All right, top 2. My boy Kayshon Boutte, best last name. I think he's the best receiver in the SEC. I'm going to throw this out here for you. I did a deep dive on this last year on the sheer production of what he did right before his injury against Kentucky. So in his last 9 games, so he had played 5 before the Kentucky game this year, and then I think it was like 3 or 4 to close out the season last year. He had over 100 yards, I believe, in at least 8 of the 9, might have been all 9. He had 13 total touchdowns in that span, and that was half. Like in that time span, LSU threw or scored on offense a total of 27 touchdowns, and Kayshon Boutte was responsible for half of them. So I just, from a production standpoint, I mean, he played 6 games and still put up like 9 touchdowns or something crazy. Like it's just crazy. But explain why is it 2?
Okay, so spoiler alert: Cedric Tillman of Tennessee is number 1. So same quarterback throwing top receiver from last year. Kayshon Boutte doesn't have the same quarterback coming back. I mean, that's huge. And he could end up in a better situation. Jaden Daniels, Miles Brennan, they could end up being better for him than Max Johnson was, perhaps. And if that's true, that's a scary thought. But also with him, he's coming back from an injury. Like, we haven't seen him since that Kentucky game, and he didn't participate this spring because he had to have a second surgery, which is a bit concerning. I mean, if he's what we saw in that first 6 games last year, you're right. He's the best receiver in the SEC, hands down. Like, first round pick, no doubt about it. Like, but I want to see that first. We haven't seen that yet. He should be good to go for the start of fall camp, and if he is, then that's a great sign for LSU. That's a great boost for whoever wins that starting quarterback job. But I just want to see it first.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so Cedric Tillman, obviously, like you said, number 1. Do you want to get into it? It makes a lot of sense. Like the Hendon Hooker thing makes a ton of sense, and him returning it. Like, I think people are starting to finally understand how good Hendon Hooker was and is from last season, and it's obviously going to carry over this year. Tennessee's a team that, like, I think their over/under from Vegas is 7.5 wins, which I would hammer. That's a team that could, like, I feel like is like pretty dangerous this year. What were your thoughts on Tillman?
Yeah, I mean, he's a big part of the returning production. You know, Bill Connolly at ESPN had, he put out his updated returning production rankings, and Tennessee returns 77% of its production. That's second in the SEC behind Mississippi State. Like, that's big. And a big part of that is Hendon Hooker, and a big part of that is Cedric Tillman. You know, even with
Yeah.
Velus Jones and Javante Payton last year, Tillman was the number one guy. You know, he had over 1,000 yards, and he was great. And now that they have an extra year working together, I expect that connection to be even better this fall. And that's scary because Hendon Hooker can throw the deep ball. Hendon Hooker can hit Tillman on a one move quick to get him the ball in space and let him do his thing. So those two can do anything on the football field together. So this is more like Kayshon Boutte, if 100% has the most talent, but Tillman's number one on this list because I think he'll put up the best numbers because of that connection with Hendon Hooker.
I'll tell you what, too, the thing about Tillman that impresses me the most is like Velus Jones last year had the most yards from scrimmage of any Tennessee player, I think, or was the second most all time, in program history, which is crazy. And so for Tillman to still put up those numbers and have 1,000 yards and over 56 catches, and he's going to only improve on that, I would assume, this year. But he had over 100 yards receiving in 5 of his last 6 games, and like what you want from any playmaker like that, right? And Kayshon Boutte, I feel like, did a good job of this. We're going back to the COVID year with him, though. Like UCLA, like that was a decently tough non-con, but everything else that was on his resume was pretty bad competition. Cedric Tillman's top 2 games of all time as a Tennessee Volunteer, his game highs in receiving yardage. Do you know what they are? Alabama and Georgia. He had 152 yards against Alabama, and he had 200 yards against Georgia. And it's difficult for an entire team to gain 200 yards in that Georgia team from last year. So for Tillman to do it, I think that speaks volume. So I like the list, man. Huge. Is there anyone else that we are missing? I'm going to give you a hot take here. I'm not trying to be a homer. I think there's going to be one of those freshmen that couldn't step up last year for Bama ends up making this list, like a Ja'Cory Brooks. I feel like because there's so much talent there, they were very young, and I'm just not sold on Jermaine Burton. And like I love the fact they got Harrell, but Jermaine Burton, like you look at what like the duos they've had in the past, he just does not fit that bill. Who is somebody that we are potentially, looking over that could just end up having a blowout season, end up top 10, top 5 in the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, so I mentioned Kyrus Jackson and at number 9 and Arian Smith in the next up, but AD Mitchell probably deserved a mention in the next up too. So he's a guy that I didn't mention on that list that has the potential if he becomes if he can develop more of a chemistry with Stetson Bennett this year. He has the talent to shoot up these rankings based on the entire package that he has as a receiver. But it's just that Georgia receiving core was so banged up last year that it's hard to get a read on any of those guys. So we'll really learn a lot about the Georgia receiving core this year, and any one of them could end up being a top 5 guy by the end of the year.
That'd be pretty good. All right, tell everyone where they can find you. We'll do running backs next week. This is fantastic as always, man.
I'm at Adam Spencer 4 on Twitter, and you can read all of our stuff in the Saturday Football newsletter.
Yeah, that thing is packed with information. I love that. All right. Thank you, sir. We will do it again next week.
Sounds good.